I tried to find a decent IIC logo last night, but it was. I ended up taking a picture of my program in my room. Didn't come out too badly. Anyway, so I'm William, and I'm from South Africa, and I'm going to be a little bit like our Minister of Communication from Brazil. So just about the organization, it's a non-profit organization. We have been running in South Africa since 1993, so since just before we became a democracy. And one of the things, and you can read that while I talk about these other bits, one of the things I was fascinated in the machine learning and AI session yesterday, the different uses that people are doing with it, and we are using machine learning to help hold media accountable in South Africa. So we do it with a very clear, deliberate agenda that's in line with our constitution. So we admit our bias, and it's very clear. And a lot of the tools that emerge from that are things that are on that little badger there. It's a badger of truth for helping journalists and helping citizens understand and see how power lies in media. And these questions of power are very fundamental to dealing with issues of so-called fake news. So, just for all of you, South Africa, in case you're not quite sure where it is, it's not Nambia. Some of you might have heard of that country. So South Africa, many of you know it, I'm sure, for that lovely mountain there and that wonderful place called Cape Town. We've got fabulous cheap wine. There's an even greater city called Johannesburg. Others of you will know South Africa through meeting many of our fabulous colleagues here from our regulator, ICASA. There's also some from MultiChoice, another massive South African success story, Telkom or Vodacom. You might also know South Africa for these reasons. Bell Pottinger's sort of faded out because it no longer exists. And this is really shows both the poor side and also the remarkable strength of media. So you've got a scenario where Bell Pottinger was deliberately using a misinformation campaign to try and destabilize and sow dissent in our country. It was thanks to journalists and investigative journalists that they discovered this, and I'd strongly encourage you to go and look up any of those sites and Google these two, that the goings-on of major corporations, including KPMG and McKinsey, have been participating in what is clearly and overtly illegal actions, also further to just steal money from our country. Now, the reason I'm using this as an example is that Bell Pottinger was deliberately putting out fake news. So you've got that lovely dichotomy. We've got very, very well-resourced, very powerful people, including within our government, still, sadly, and very, outside forces, which you may argue this is treason, coming in and purveying fake news. And at the same time, you've got very, very brave whistleblowers and journalists who are writing the most incredible stories exposing and revealing these things. And you can't really have a democracy without those things. So in as much as the fake news side is really bad, that role of journalism is even more critical now than it has ever been in our countries. And what it does serve to show is just the remarkable global nature of these activities. So what we're doing about it is this. So we've got two strategies. The one is we're working with citizens and journalists to help them discern what's credible and what's fake. So we've got a program with children, and in fact we work with all of the big players, Facebook and Google and a mobile operator and government, to help young people learn about critically engaging with content. We've then also built a little Chrome extension, which is there. It's NewsCred. If you go to the store, you'll find it there. And what we've done there, and this is again largely South African focused, is that we've taken sites that we know are legitimate and credible, and I'll tell you how we determine that in a moment. And if you click on one of those sites, the extension light will turn green, and if you go to a site that we know is dodgy and issues news that is deeply problematic, then it'll be red. And if we don't know, it'll be grey. Now, we also don't like this term of fake news, because the thing with a lot of these purveyors of this kind of information is that they're clever. They're not necessarily stupid. Even the ones that are out there doing it for clickbait purposes, a lot of the news that they actually put on their sites isn't actually entirely fake or entirely false. What they'll do is they'll take the first few lines, make some of that stuff up, and then they'll use credible sources. In fact, what we see is that they steal from legitimate news organizations and put their content there, and then they just make up a few lines of nonsense about it on top of it, So you can't say that the whole thing is fake. What it is, though, is dodgy, and it is there to undermine and make sure that people don't understand what's happening in society. So our approach to this is to say what we need to do is actually build credibility, because for far too long there's been this assumption, certainly in media and where we come from, where people assume that everyone knows that media is good and that journalism is a public good, and that I don't think that everyone necessarily these days assumes that. You just need a president of a massive country to say that all credible media is fake news, and suddenly all of us suffer because of that, right? So what we need to be doing is helping make sure that we build credibility. So the one thing we've done for that then is this thing called Open and Disclose. And if you can click on that link there for me, please. So this is a staging site. It's not live at the moment, but what we're doing is with our press council, we've got 4 of the biggest media houses in our country have already agreed to support this, where media entities that we know are real, where they've got real journalists, where if you have a complaint, you can go and you can report it to them. They've signed up to this, which means that they'll have a little badge on their site. If you see that badge, it means they're credible. It doesn't mean that we vouch for any of their content, because we know journalists with the best will get things wrong. But what it does mean is that for ordinary citizens, it's a place where they can go and see, if they're looking on a website, and if they see that badge, it means more than likely they can trust that content. If they don't see it, they should beware. The fact that we then do it with the press council adds that additional element to it that says this is something, if they're a member of the press council, it means they agree to adhere to particular standards. So it helps people get a better sense of credibility. We're also then doing it for individuals so that people can search and track different journalists and individuals. I think I think that I'm done now. So this is going to be launched sometime next week. We're just busy adding the various media houses and organizations that'll go there, and I'm happy to demo this to anyone who's interested in it afterwards. But what we are finding is that the advertisers have approached us. So there's the IAB. I think you've got the IAB certainly in the UK. I'm not sure for Europe. Internet Advertisers Bureau. Their local group in South Africa have approached us because they have a similar concern about advertisers and how do people know who are reputable and who aren't. So we're seeing that there's a very nice mix here, that we're getting buy-in from big industry with civil society in order to help promote quality, credible journalism. Thanks.
Thank you.